Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sacred Conversations. And with us today is Bruce Taylor. So, hello, Bruce. Thank you so
Hello,
much.
everybody.
Hello. And of course, you are with us, Faye De Leon and Ru Diamante. And we are your hosts for this podcast. So anyway, we could actually begin by maybe having a short introduction. So Bruce, could you tell us a little bit about you and your practice?
Sure. I'm very happy to be here, first and foremost, and thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. So, yeah, I have been working kind of traditionally with Reiki since 2006 is when I did my first attunement. But for my life, I've always had a kind of a sensitivity to my own body. You know, we are all born with, of course, different kind of attributes and strengths and weaknesses and so on, right? Everybody is. And one of my kind of strengths, I think, was just being, for better or worse, was being really aware of this thing inside of me, like it's chi, it's the key of Reiki, right? But I remember as a little boy, just sitting in now what I know is meditation, but I would just sit somewhere to be quiet. And I remembered that something would move through my body, and I remember making it felt like it was tickling my inside of my body, you know, like this really nice kind of feeling that I had no idea what it was. And so as a boy, I was sitting with that. And then of course that led into, naturally, by staying with the conversation and practice of energy, then as these things work out, you know, teachers come to you. So I started to learn yoga, and I started to learn Tai Chi, spirituality things, you know, like different avenues of mindfulness and spirituality practices and Buddhism and things like that. And then it moved into finally settling in a Reiki practice, which I started in 2006. And so I've been a secondary school teacher, as was my first and kind of like main career. So I'm a teacher at heart. And that's now transitioned fully into working with Reiki and Holistic Wellness. But I teach a lot of modalities, not just Reiki. Like I'm a yoga instructor and a breathwork instructor, and I work with plant medicines and couple therapy and stuff like that. So there's other components that I do, but Reiki is kind of my focus. And my background with Reiki has settled into the Usui Reiki Ryoho, or the traditional Japanese practice of Reiki. So I'm most recently trained in Kyoto, Japan, under Hakutan Enomoto with Komyo Reiki-Do. Was actually just sitting with them about an hour and a half ago here, practicing for the global share. And yeah, now I teach Reiki and Usui Reiki Ryoho globally. And it's kind of my focus to help people to connect to the stillness that is within a Reiki practice, and to see there's maybe another level to it beyond the idea of it as a healing modality, but it's maybe more as at least this is where I'm at, maybe more of a practice of recognizing non-duality. And so
Yeah.
that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, thanks so much, Bruce. Well, I just like to come back to one of the things that you said about being a teacher. So I think that's something in common for us three, because all of
Mhm.
us are also teachers, like a teacher by profession. So that's pretty cool. And how it actually becomes another tool for you in your teaching of another domain, right? In spirituality now. And you mentioned that you started out, having these sensitivities as a young boy, and it eventually led you to different practices, to different teachers. As we know it, like when you are ready, the teacher will show up, right? The right teacher will show up. But I'm curious though, like, how were you led from one practice to another? Like maybe you could shed some light on that. Like, you said you started out meditating. Yeah, you didn't really call it meditation before, but you just really enjoyed the stillness, the quietness of it all. And then you said you were introduced to different teachers and different practices. So how did it go about? Like, how were you led from one to the next and to another?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, like you were saying, Faye, in each one of those practices, then another opportunity would kind of present itself. And so I can use my background as an Ashtanga yoga instructor. There was a long time, maybe 3 or 4 years, that I was very strict with being vegetarian and vegan and all of that type of stuff. And at the same time, that led into a deepening of like the limbs of yoga and the practice of yoga. And then I ended up studying yoga and became a teacher. And it's almost as if that chapter, or maybe right now what I needed to learn, it seems like that had kind of been satisfied, and then another avenue would open up, and so it's just kind of moving with as much as I can, it's trying to move with the flow of, or the direction of the unseen, as it were, and just kind of trusting, like moving from one modality to the next, and then always bringing those things in so that they are hopeful components that I can help other people understand and I can teach to other people.
Yeah, Bruce, totally resonate with that. When Rue and I were talking days before our interview, or even when she had the idea of inviting you in sacred conversations, I told her, "Wow, I looked at your website and your YouTube, and also your practices, what you offer." And then I told her, "Wow, I really resonate with everything, because like you, Bruce, it's the same for me, like being led from one to another." So what you mentioned about feeling, learning about something and then being satisfied with what you learn, and then it would just naturally lead you to another practice.
Mm.
I think I think it's also coming from the intention of wanting to share your light and wanting to help others with their journey too, right? And like equipping yourself with knowledge, with practices that would actually help you in doing that, right? So I think that's where it's coming from too. Is that right?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it speaks to, what you're saying we all share, is kind of that teacher hat,
Mm.
definitely my practice with Reiki, for instance, it used to be very much focused on the client, on the healing, like the healing component of Reiki. Like I was working in a medical center in Hong Kong as a practitioner, but that my main hat, I think, is a teacher, right? And so at some point, the hands-on with the clients, that has become kind of secondary, so that my primary vehicle to help others is teaching, right? And so putting all of those things together, then that's where I've kind of put my focus for the moment. I don't know how that's going to change in the future or how that continues, but here we are anyway.
Right. Just
Yeah,
go in with the flow,
yeah,
naturally being
absolutely.
led to where we're supposed to be, right? And um, speaking of which, mentioning that you have different practices, you practice different modalities, and you teach them too. Like I'm curious about um, the role of these different modalities for you. Like for instance, yes, you teach Reiki, and you started Reiki in many years ago, right? You've been practicing it, you've been teaching it, and then you are also into sound healing, right? And you're also into breath work and meditation and all of that. Like, could you tell us, like, um, what is the role of each of these practices for you as a practitioner and as a teacher, and also to the different people that you meet, your clients, your students. So how's that for you?
Yeah, sure. I guess kind of the way to put that is, we can look at the thread that binds all of these practices is the energy, right? It's the energy of Reiki, or the energy of the universe. Even by saying it's the energy of Reiki, that I'm not trying to say that we're putting importance on the practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho, or whatever modality of Reiki one might practice. I'm simply meaning the energy of all things, right? And so, each one of these practices, be it sound or breath work, meditation, yoga, psychedelics, whatever these types of things are, all of those help us connect in different ways to the energy of the universe. And so for some people who maybe are very aware of their body, like they can feel their muscles and they're very kind of internal in that space. Well, then Reiki might be a very good fit because you can feel how it moves through the body. And you can, I think what we do is we find comfort in the familiar, right? So for instance, like if I'm trying to let go and cultivate non-duality and let go of the friction and the resistance within the body, if I'm deeply familiar with my body, then I'm going to feel it as it moves and as it finds balance, right? If I'm not connected to the body like that, maybe I'm really connected to sound. Maybe my auditory sense is really strong, but my physical connection is a little bit weaker. So sound is going to help cultivate that movement or journey of the individual. Maybe they are already deep in a practice and simply sitting in zazen, which I teach and work with all the time. Maybe that's simply where people need to be. Like, remember, Mikao Usui is talking about the initial teachings that, when he was starting to spread Reiki to the world after his enlightenment, the story goes that it was being taught in many different avenues. So if somebody is a very adept meditator, then they would simply just sit in meditation together because there's no need to even practice Reiki, because Reiki is just another tool to get to stillness, right? So yoga is the same thing. Yoga is not about stretching and holding postures. It's about a cultivation of non-duality and stillness during the stretching. And when we're actually performing the asana, we're simply allowing the body to have less resistance by opening these muscles, opening the shoulder, opening the hips, so that the nervous system can flow with less resistance, so we can have less story to hold on to. It's the same in a psychedelic space. When you get into that space with plant medicines, then you're in an environment where the ego is so quiet that the flow of the energy of the universe becomes very palpable, very tangible. And you can simply surrender into that and simply sit with it and be with it. So all of those different modalities connect us back to the same central hub, if you were, of that wheel, which is the energy of the universe. It just depends on how, even for me, like some days Reiki is really good. Some days I'm tight in the body, so I need to do my Ashtanga practice. And some days I need to do breath work. It's just all about meeting us kind of where we are, right?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. It's that's so true. And it goes to show how it also honors how multifaceted we all are as human beings, right? Like, yes, we are all one and the same. Like, we're all interconnected. Through energy, right? Like, it exists in all of us, like this consciousness, it exists in each one of us, but it can actually be shown or be translated or be radiated in different ways, right? And that's how we work as human beings. So that's so beautiful, Bruce. It's like, I like the way how you put it, respecting recognizing, honoring what is actually in resonance with us or with the people. And yeah, so it's basically catering to the variety that we all are, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's beautiful. And maybe Rue, would you like to add if you have any questions before we move on to sound healing, like talking more about sound healing?
I'm just so taking it all in. But then like what Bruce was saying about non-duality and stuff. I guess with all, regardless of modality, it still boils down to that one fact, right? Non-duality. There's no past, no present, no future, and then
Right.
that's where the connection happens. And regardless of what practice you're doing, it's being in that state of non-duality. That's what you want to come across as a teacher or as a human being. Like, you're no different from I am. Even if you're in France, I'm here in Manila, we're still connected. Like,
Right.
everything that I do to myself has that ripple effect at some point, when we interact, kind of thing. So yeah, I'm just, just take it away. I'm just listening here. And
Okay, thanks, Rue.
Well, I think
And
I'll
I
add
know
something
that
really
Faye is
quickly to that.
bubbling with, yeah, like bubbling with lots of questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
So yeah.
You were going to say something.
Yeah, so we can, even within the practice of Reiki, for instance, let's look at URR, like Usui Reiki Ryoho, right? We can, for me, and I really try to find fault with this and this is kind of the common thread with religion. Like if we can get, and to spirituality, by the way, if we can get to a concept of this stillness, of this non-dualistic, even if you touch it just for just like that, and then it's gone, that's fine. It doesn't matter. That's still, you still felt it a little bit. Like there's no Christ or Usui or me or you or Buddha, or there's nothing there because it's all there at the same time. And so, if we can recognize that, then, maybe we can start to see attachment in our practice. So for instance, if I start to identify as an Usui Reiki Ryoho practitioner, and if I chant things in Japanese, and if I'm like trying to learn Japanese, and if I'm going like hard out Japanese, everything Japanese, 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 am I not just creating an image about myself and an attachment about myself? Like I'm a better practitioner because I know these things and because I do these things in Japanese or whatever. That's the same as saying I'm a better Ashtanga teacher because I've learned this in this place. So all of that is a form of attachment. And so if we can unwind all of those things and simply bow and gashao and simply sit and hope. It's not easy. I'm not trying to act like it's easy, but if we can just work towards a mind that goes down in its frequency, meaning I guess what I mean by that is like, so if I'm sitting in gashao and I have a pain, okay, so what? Just be soft and kind to it. If I have a memory, so what? Be soft and kind. And eventually all of those stories lose their meaning. If you're sitting in your practice and you think you're connected to a deity, so what? Just lose the meaning, because all of that is a form of attachment. And attachment causes suffering, and it causes hierarchy and dualities and all these types of things, right? So that's that common thread between all things. Like Rue is saying, if I'm sitting here and practicing Reiki on myself, and I can recognize Rue and you, Faye, if I can recognize you in me, and I can recognize that I'm in you as an energy, well, then why would I ever want to harm myself or you? Because it's the same thing. We can recognize a softness and a stillness that connects all things.
Yeah. Ooh, that's so good. And Bruce, all of what you said is so packed. I want to dissect it, but then it's also it's really true. Like we're all connected like that, and we're not separate from each other. We're not separate even from nature. We're not separate even from the cosmos. So it's all just one. I want to. I don't know what I'm going to 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 dive into with everything that you said, but it's just so beautiful. Like I think I need a moment to digest all of that. But Rue, do you have anything that you wish to say with what
No,
Bruce just said?
it's more of like, I guess, what I'm going to say is that, we all try to learn new things, like Bruce came from Kyoto, like to deepen the practice, and then you are into sound healing. It's more of like making, of course, making yourself better for you, so that you can impart the knowledge in the best way that you can. And then, for example, with the sound healing, because I'm hearing impaired, okay? And so it's more of like, even if I take off the hearing aid and if I can't hear it very well, it's the vibration that would speak to me and your energy. Because when you do for example, like, because I know that Bruce is also into sound healing, face into sound healing. So when just moving as one with a singing bowl, like even if I can't hear it the first tone, it's it's already there. You can feel the flow of the energy, and then you feel the vibration,
Mm.
so that's oneness
Right, right.
with what you're doing. So being a Reiki practitioner, being a sound healer, it's the energy that you bring to it, and then that's where you would feel the connection more strongly.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So yeah,
yeah.
so that's what I
And
if it's yes.
I'd also like
Feel free.
to touch upon what Bruce mentioned about non-attachment. That's so beautiful because, like, I think with whatever we do, there's like this layer of illusion that we have to peel off. Like, that's why we call it a practice, right? So whether we're already in a practice or doing whatever modality that we have, whatever tool that we have in our toolbox, there's this tendency or this possibility that we could still have that attachment to an image, or I'm this or I'm that, this is who I am. Labeling, I think it's a human tendency, right? But I think that's where, for instance, our Reiki practice, for instance, or whatever works for us, I think that's where it could shine brighter. That's where it could really work. It's in melting or peeling off those layers of ideas, or those layers of illusion that we could possibly build around ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these layers of illusions are just, you know they could cause separation instead of more connection. So there you go. That's why I find it so true. I find it so true. And these are the things that sometimes we can't really, I don't know how to explain it, but I know you guys understand. I know you guys understand that it's all about the remaining aware, right? It's all about truly practicing all the time, um, practicing that awareness. And I think it's also important to connect to others, like not be in isolation. Like, because
Mm-hmm.
I just remember I had this time in my life when I started with my awakening journey, I would say, that I felt like I needed to really be alone most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I really needed to go through that. Maybe it was a dark night of the soul, or it was like purging a lot of things, like unlearning a lot of things about myself. And then finally coming into that point of reintegrating. And when I came to that realization, I said, no, community is really important too, because it will help you also in your journey, and in your awareness. And it helps that, yes, you practice awareness, but it's also a different thing of having a community that
Mm-hmm.
would, ground you as well. And it's so powerful too, like practicing with different people, and all recognizing that you're all journeying home, and you're walking. There's this quotation that says, we're just really walking each other home, right? So
Right. Yeah.
that's it. So I just pulled that out from what you mentioned, Bruce. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. So
Of course, and I think if we use that, Faye, as kind of an understanding, at least this is how I view how Reiki heals. Okay.
mm,
So if we sit in a practice, like if I was seeing either one of you, if you came to me for a Reiki session, right? And if I have any of the following forms of attachment, then I'm not, in my opinion, I'm not in the practice. So if you come to me and I view you as a client and I'm the practitioner, then I'm attached to a hierarchy. if I'm attached to the idea that I'm going to use the symbols over you, or I'm going to interpret what you have, or I'm going to do anything in my mind or my ego to help you heal, that to me is not, it's not Reiki. Now, that might come as a surprise, but take the converse of that. The only person that can heal me is me. The only person that can heal you, Faye, is you. And same for you, Ru. The only person who can heal you is you, because you're on your own journey. Like you just so beautifully said, Faye, we're helping each other to walk home, right? But you have to walk. You have to make those steps, right? I can't take your legs and move them for you. No amount of me invoking chokure on somebody else, or seihiki, or all of these things are beliefs. Like, I have something that you don't, I'm going to give you Reiki. That doesn't make any sense. Reiki is universal energy. So instead of the idea of I'm going to heal, or this is a directional practice, or I'm going to give you something, or there's angels, or there's guides, or there's usui, or there's belief, none of that stuff makes any sense to me, because the converse is, what if I'm able to just constantly try to stay neutral in my body, to have my mind quiet and still? When I place my hands then maybe on your head or your body, or whenever we're engaging in the session, if my mind can stay still, then you're almost resting in the support to take your own next step into your own darkness, or your dark night of the soul, or whatever it is you're trying to heal, because you know that there's this kind of hopeful, non-dualistic, non-judgmental, non-belief driven support that's almost like, if you stumble, my hands are here, but I'm not going to pay attention to it. I'm just going to simply be guiding or sitting and holding space with it, because any type of awareness is going to have the potential for judgment or belief, which might impede your next step on your own journey. So if you stumble, there's support. Step, 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 step. Move at your own pace and your own movement forward, right? Now, I'm saying all of that like, I'm not trying to act like that's completely easy, right? So our minds get busy. We come back into our own belief, our own ego. So then this is where the beauty of Reiki comes into play. Like, let us not forget the precepts, right? I want to do my work honestly. And in order to do that, if my mind gets busy, I'm not going to worry. If I can't calm my mind down, I'm not going to get angry at it, but instead I'm just going to be kind and loving to it and grateful. And then eventually it hopefully will settle down. If it doesn't, then maybe I need to go back and maybe do Kenyoku Ho, or Joshin Kokyo Ho, or Sesshin Titsu. Maybe I need to go back and through all of those. If that doesn't work, maybe I need to chant the symbols to myself. All of those are ways to keep my busy mind a little bit less busy, gravitate it hopefully back to a central point of stillness, where then I can just simply rest in the practice. And simply rest with the person who's on the table and stay as that support. Reiki is not something that I'm giving you, because we are Reiki. It's the universal energy, right? And yeah, I hope that we don't forget the meaning of the precepts and the meaning of the word Reiki when we start to say things like, I'm trained under Takata, or I'm this, or I'm that, or I'm this, or I'm that. Well, at some point, all of that has to be forgiven. Or not forgiven, but let go of, because we need to surrender just into the energy itself and recognize that we're all one.
Right. Which circles back to the first thing you said, about viewing another person as not really another. Like when somebody comes in to you, whether it's a client, a student, whatever, it's not viewing them as different, not viewing them as someone lower or higher. Even if it's a teacher of yours, not viewing them as higher or lower, but actually recognizing that we're all one and the same, right?
Yeah.
That's so beautiful, and it's so true. And, Bruce, as I was listening to you, I just can't help but think that, the embodiment of these precepts, the practice, the spiritual practices, I think, with everything that's happening in the world right now, for me, it just really highlights all the more the importance of having these practices, like for every person to really be connected to the love that they are, because I think it's really the point of it all, like everything that, like the suffering, all the hatred that's going on, all the greed, wanting power and more of it. Actually, I think the driving force is just really the lack of recognizing the love in oneself. And because, having that love energy in oneself would actually mean that it's also a person recognizing that we're not really separate, right? And it goes back to what you said too. So I don't know. I think it's just really, I would say, what a time to be alive, right? What a time to be alive, and what a time to be learning all these, and continuously learning, continuously practicing, continuously sharing what we can to each and every one. Yeah. So I just needed to let that out, because with everything that's happening, I think it's really all the more relevant, right?
Absolutely. And with all of these things, it's easy to get overwhelmed, right? I mean, there's everything that's happening. It's easy to feel like, oh my gosh, it's so negative, it's so dark, it's so everything. But remember, where does all of that lie? It lies here.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Ukraine is not happening. Obviously, it obviously is. And COVID is happening, and there's misery, and there's suffering, and there's all those things, right? But there's also an interpretation of it here. And so if we can cultivate that stillness in our mind and body, and we can sit with that, well, then in that moment, where is the suffering and the pain? Now, I'm not being so naive as to say, well, there's people who are dying, right? I know they are. I know that. I get that. But don't forget, for instance, the monks that will cultivate such a level of stillness that they can walk right into death to try to stop other people's suffering. Don't forget the level of stillness that was discussed and talked about in the scriptures of the crucifixion of Christ, right? Don't forget about the level of stillness that is in that, and the whole discussion on the crucifixion of Christ, for instance, dying for the sins of people who are ignorant to even what they're doing, right? That doesn't mean that Christ is somehow better. It means that the internal environment of Christ is still, so that there's just compassion, endless compassion for people who are not aware of the friction. So if we work on cultivating compassion inside of us as much as we can, then that spreads. It's felt, because we're all part of the same energy. It's like almost like a tug of war, right? Is it going to win over by compassion, or is it going to win over by greed and lust and violence? Like, which one is going? And at some point, compassion has to win, because compassion is the energy of the universe, because it's Reiki. Right?
Totally. Yes.
Yeah.
I love it. I love this conversation, and I don't know, I wanted to touch upon something with that too. But maybe Rue, maybe you have anything you'd like to share?
No, I'm okay. I'm just like overwhelmed over here.
Yeah. Every time we speak about a topic, it's like a lot of thoughts come up, and yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And I want to touch on it. But of course, it's like, it's a vast topic, but we can all connect to it. And I'm sure, the people who will be listening to this would feel it too. And maybe I just want to say that, because I've been having conversations with my students too, who are in France. And of course, they share about feeling anxious about everything that's happening, right? It's normal. But at the same time, I also recognize that I think the beauty also, it's ironic, because of course, what's happening is chaotic, but then I also see the beauty somehow, because the people are starting to show more compassion. Like, people, we could see it in the news. We could see people don't really want the war, right? We could see how people, even at the start of the pandemic, we could rewind to that. Like, people have this, we're filled with so much anxiety, filled with so much worry, that it already was full to the brim, that people were just really forced to pause and stop and actually dive deep within. Like I think it was the pandemic was a pause for all of us, like a reset, we could say. And it actually also became a sort of what's a good word for that? Like it was a catalyst, maybe we could say, a catalyst for people to actually deepen the awareness, right? And like with all the worries that are looming around, people just started getting tired, feeling tired. It's like, okay, I think this is not going anywhere, so why not go within, right?
Right.
Why not pause and actually pick up a practice of breathing, learn how to connect to my breath, learn how to sit in stillness. So I think that's also the beauty of it. Like, with the chaos, it's like yin and yang, right?
Absolutely.
There's chaos where there's call for more yin, because we've always been yang, right?
Right. Right.
So yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
it's there. We have all of these histories of things like oppression and racism and governments that are totalitarian, or, cultural beliefs, religious ideologies, all this manner of suffering that's been with us as we've moved over these past couple hundred years through industrialization and capitalism and all these types of things have caused all of these forms of suffering. And like you said, Faye, it's all young. It's all like progress and movement and growth and building and whatever. But we also need to, and right now, I think that yang energy is opening up that wound, that kind of infested wound, that sick wound of, like, in the US, for instance, racism has never been fully, I'm not making this political, I'm just giving an example, but it's never been properly addressed, but it's always festering away. And so now we've had to look inward, and the last thing most people want to do is go in, because they're afraid of their problems. They're afraid of their skeletons in the closet. But the only thing we really have to fear there is just fear. Now some people are suffering tremendous amounts of suffering that are unfathomable. I couldn't even imagine how much suffering people have. I'm not saying that's an easy path, but all wounds have to be opened and cleaned before they can heal. Right? We can't just stitch it closed and act like everything is fine, because you haven't cleaned out the internal environment. So we have to keep going in. That's why, again, the precepts, and even with Reiki, like the meaning of the words, the guidance is right there. Okudan means the inner truth or the inner practice of Reiki. Shoden means the initial knowledge, right? The initial understanding that you get from the hand placements and so on. Inside. It's not to you or to my family or to the external world. It's all in me, because if I'm festering away inside, then I'm going to treat the rest of the world the same way. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, Rue.
Inner works.
Mm-mm. That's so true. And yeah, we always have to begin with ourselves, right? It's the starting point. It's always with the self. We can't depend on another person to do it for us, just like what you said earlier, Bruce. You can't really make the person take the steps, right? But there has to be that willingness, and there has to be that how do you call that? I forgot the word. I'm losing my words today, but it's really the willingness to go through it, like the decision, right? The decision to actually do it for you,
Right.
Right?
At some point, the difficulty of holding on will be superseded by the friction of letting go. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to hold on to all of my belief and all of my traumas and all of my pain and suffering and so on, until I recognize that this is causing so much fatigue and it's so difficult and everything, that I need to open up. And now, a lot of times, people who I meet, my clients and some of my students and so on, and when I'm teaching Reiki classes and stuff, sometimes I hear people say, like, I don't want to go inside. It's too scary. It's too dark. It's too whatever, right? The beauty of a self practice is that Our physical, our mental, and our spiritual bodies are far too intelligent. I'm convinced of this anyways, to let go of too much that we can't handle. You know, like any one of us, if I could just pull out all of the stuff that I'm holding on to from this life and past lives, all of my karma or whatever, I would probably be schizophrenic. I'd probably kill myself. It'd probably be too much, right? Just like everybody else, right? All the misery of, let's say I'm totally balanced, but then there's all the suffering of everything else in the whole universe, right? So if we turn in with silence and stillness and compassion, then our bodies, like I mentioned, the physical, mental, and spiritual bodies, allow that internal experience to be let go of in little whispers and little flickers and little images, in little experiences and little releases that are manageable. And when something big comes up, we have a practice of love and kindness and stillness and compassion to work through that huge release, right? Constantly turn inward and inward and inward, and then we let go, right? And there's nothing to be afraid of except fear. That's it, right?
Yeah. And it's also the nature of nature, right? The process of actually letting go many times, like just like the seasons, right? It doesn't stay winter all the time, doesn't stay summer all the time, doesn't stay spring all the time, but really have to go through these seasons. And just like that, we get filled. We need to declutter. We need to release what is no longer serving us. And because we're a dynamic being, we're alive. So we just have to really go through that process, which is similar to what nature teaches us, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's so true.
It's the evidence is all around us. Every single day we die and we're reborn every single morning. Every single time it's a practice of coming back to the inevitable. Like you said it, in the seasons, you see all of the plant life dying away so that it can nurture itself to grow again. Everything is just a waking metaphor for the movement of energy from one form to another.
Right.
Everything is. All religions, all the tapestry behind you, everything, all of the things that we can see, everything around us is just an understanding of that movement of energy, because it is that energy in motion, right?
Yeah.
That's it. And we suffer because we fight against the inevitable movement of that energy.
Yeah, that's
Instead
what the resistance.
The resistance, exactly.
Right.
The trees outside, when they die, when their branches break, it just falls to the ground and becomes new soil, right? I can't speak for the trees, of course, but there's a cycle that is uninterrupted and logical. And, I'll just speak really quickly to, like I'm a psychedelic practitioner as well. And I've definitely been in states where you come out and I've been in communion with the plants outside in that space. And they'll say things like, do you understand it now? You can see it. Now, can you see how the energy from your heart affects the trees in your garden? Can you see? Because we'll tell you, we'll show you, you can literally see it happening. And then it's like, oh, okay. So I'm actually not this amazing human that I thought I was. I'm actually part of this entire, yes, now you get it. Okay, congratulations, Bruce. You just leveled up. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like that type of thing happens. And then when you're hit with that stillness in Reiki, you get still enough that you recognize that we're not separated. Congratulations. That's a level up. You know what I mean? Because you've let go of this fictitious belief about the self.
Totally.
Hold on to everything. Hold on, and resist change. But why? We are change. Nothing is inevitable, or nothing is permanent, right? So
it's so humbling to know that we're just a small speck in this wonderful, miraculous universe, right? Yeah, that's so
beautiful.
true.
Small, all connected. Universe keeps on sending reminders, especially with the season that, hey, you're part of this whole thing.
Absolutely. And how liberating and freeing and comforting is that? Because, if we fight and we fight against all of that, well, then what are we? Then we're a microcosm, a separate little island in this entire thing, and we're alone, we're isolated, right? But as soon as and I'm not trying to act like this is an easy thing, but if you feel it once or twice, then that's enough. This is a common discussion in Buddhism. Like you can feel a moment once, and in that one moment is the entire universe. Everything exists. So you don't need to feel this constantly, right? Just see it one time. And then all of a sudden you recognize that you are surrounded and supported and loved by literally every single pulsation of energy in the universe. That's awesome.
And be grateful that you get to wake up
Exactly.
every
And then
day
follow the footsteps. Yeah.
and be part of the magic
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's where
of
also
existing.
that's where also being present comes in, right? Like not just really being in the now, because that is what's happening. That is what we have, right? So I love how, all of these concepts are coming in all together. And it's so evident when we speak about, yes, we speak about Reiki, but it's also present in all the practices that you do, Bruce, right? So I love that. I love that. So
yeah, we can say to sound, I mean, Rue was mentioning sound before. So what happens in a sound session? Well, if you're sitting there and you're guiding people on an experience with singing bowls, for instance, when I talk about this from a very literal perspective, the reason why they're so conductive or conducive, I guess I should say, to a deep state of meditation is because the conflicting sound waves, you've playing maybe 3 or 4 different Tibetan bowls. You've got one peak and trough like this. You've got another one like this. They're bouncing all over the room and everything. The mind just at some point gets so confused by where all these different sounds are coming from that it just shuts down, in a very simplistic way to put it. And you get carried away then by, yes, the literal vibration off the bowls, by the vibration of the sound wave, all of that going through your nervous system brings or helps to elicit a transcendental experience, because it might be powerful enough to shut down an overactive mind. And then where are you? Well, then you're back to everything that we've just talked about, recognizing a oneness with the universe, recognizing that maybe you can feel, for instance, the trapped energy in the shoulders. Like most people have stressed, tight shoulders, right? Why is it that when you're in a sound session, all of a sudden that melts away? Why does it feel like it's moving from your feet to the ground? Why do we say being grounded? I don't think people take it to that further level. Being grounded means that you are not separated. Right? There's no belief between my body and the earth, so the energy can just flow through those two without any type of story. In a singing bowl session, the sound helps take away the story, so we can just simply exist and flow. Right?
Yeah, I love that explanation. It's like confusing the mind to the point that the mind is confused and it just releases all the built structure, all the built walls, and whatever we want to call it. But I love that explanation. It confuses the mind to the point that it just really releases and lets go.
Yeah,
right?
I'm out of here. This is too much. See ya. I'm gone. And then boom, and then you finally let go of all of the ego or the control, the structure, the belief, right?
Right. And what's really cool with that too is that when a client lies down, for instance, or hears the sound, I don't know, lying down, seated, whatever, when somebody hears these vibrations or feels these vibrations, hears the sound, they don't even know, or really maybe they don't really understand what's going on, but it just happens, right? So I mean, that's why when you gave that explanation, it's like, oh yeah, I mean, that's a really good way to put it. Like when I speak about sound healing, or what I always tell people is that, yeah, there's this entrainment also that, from the high frequency coming from the instruments, and your body kind of aligns with it, so there's that entrainment going on. But that's actually a very good way to explain it too, like how it helps us let go, how it helps us to surrender to the moment. Yeah, beautifully put.
And so you think if you've got like a lower back pain, for instance, right? Well, that's probably because of some sort of an emotion or a physical trauma or something, right? So there's some story that's attached there, right? And so always come back to this understanding. It's the same with Reiki, right? Always come back to this understanding, regardless if it's physical trauma, emotional trauma, whatever it might be. Maybe you've just broken your back, or maybe you have a tight muscle. It's all the same thing. Where is that understanding stored or processed? In the mind, right? So if the mind is quiet, even if you have a broken back, well, if the mind is quiet, you don't have a broken back because it's not being interpreted. This is what happens when we go under anesthetics, right? How can you have open heart surgery? Because they shut down the ability for the brain to understand what's going on. So it can just happen, right? Because there's nothing to interpret the pain or freak out about it or resist it or anything. So we just let go. It's the same with bulls. So you let go of that story, and then all of a sudden that lower lumbar spine area, the muscles in the, in the lower back, they might finally release the emotion that they've been holding on to because there's no reason to hold on to it anymore. And then finally that emotion is free, the muscle is free, the back pain is gone. Then what happens? Well, then they go back into their normal life. The same causal thing, stimuli is there, the muscle tightens up again, and then the back hurts again. So we have to keep going back to it until the life that person or me or whatever is leading changes. So we no longer see that stimuli. Positive evolution through our own lives towards more and more stillness.
Exactly. Yeah. So all of these are, sound healing is, it's an instrument in itself. Like, literally and figuratively, it's an instrument to aid people who are, maybe not knowing yet how to release or where to start with releasing. Because, sometimes I hear people saying that, when you do sound healing or when you do Reiki, maybe there's a tendency of people to also not do their work, not do their inner work, like kind of depend on the practitioner. They keep coming back, maybe because it happens again and again and again. But it's actually, I think it's a jumping point, like it's a springboard where it could help and guide people to actually understand what's going on in their body, whether that's physical, mental, spiritual, emotional. Understand that, hey, okay, that's why I have this back pain, that's why I have this physical pain. It's because of the accumulated emotions that I have, or the accumulated trauma that I've garnered throughout the years. And now that I'm doing this practice of Reiki or sound healing or meditation, it actually does a lot of good to me because it helps my brain stop, stop holding on too much to things and just really let things flow, let things go and let things flow. Right. Yeah.
And let some of the pressure out of that balloon, right? And then eventually the whole balloon is deflated and then you no longer have that trauma.
Exactly.
Right. And that is, all of this is also a practice for ultimately for death, because hopefully at the moment of death, we can recognize that balloon has become completely deflated and we're happy with it and we can let go, as opposed to trying to cling on and fight and stay attached to the body. And then we're just suffering. Right. And we just further if you believe in this, if it's your religious practice, we just lock ourselves to the wheel of reincarnation over and over and over again. Right.
Ooh, that was so good. Thank you for that. Well, I think we could wrap up this sacred conversation.
Part one. There'll be part two.
Yeah, because in the email I mentioned to Bruce that I think this is not the only time that we'll be speaking, because we could go on and on. Like, for example, today we just it was a lot of points were mentioned, and we want to go deeper into those things. We could always go deeper into them, but we could have more interviews in the future, of course, I think.
I'd be very happy to. There's so much, right? And it's beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And time stood still. It just went so fast.
I know, it's so fast. It's so fast. That's true. And I just really want to say thank you, Bruce, for saying yes to us, Ru and I, because this is really part of the work, the work that we do, not just in our own countries, not just in our own families, not just with ourselves, but with each and every one. As we say, we're one and the same. So this conversation, I'm sure, would spark or ignite something in someone, and but of course starting with ourselves, rippling out through our own practices. But this is just really great. Thank you so much for saying yes, and thank you so much for the future conversations as well.
It's absolutely an honor. Thank you, ladies. I really appreciate it.
Yes, you're welcome.
Absolutely.
And maybe, Bruce, as we end, would you like to share to our listeners any offerings that you have, or where could they contact you? Where could they reach you?
Oh, yeah, gladly. Yes. So you can go, and if you want to see more about my story with Reiki and my lineage and my offerings and so on, my website is rootsoflife.org. So rootsoflife.org. You can also find me on Facebook. I manage the Usui Reiki Ryoho support and community group. I'm assuming we can link all of these here with the video as well. So I'd be very happy to have you join the URR group that I manage.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
from my site, if you want to learn Reiki, or if you would like mentorship, or you want to learn sound healing, or if you need help with your psychedelic journey, or any of the modalities that I teach, you can see what I offer on my website. And I'd be very happy to walk with all of you. It's absolutely an honor and my pleasure. So there we are. You can find
Thank
me.
you. We will be including those links in our YouTube video. Okay, so
Wonderful. Yeah, wonderful. And I have a YouTube channel as well, where I talk a lot about Reiki and a lot about the background of my practice and thoughts on Reiki as well. So we can share that.
yes, definitely. Thank you so much. And Ru, any words that you'd like to say?
I'm just blessed and grateful.
Blessed and
To
grateful.
be here with you too,
As am I.
And
Yes.
no accident.
No.
This is
No
not,
accidents. Yeah, no coincidences.
No
Nope.
coincidences.
Thank
Thank you so much, Bruce.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Thank you.
And gosh out to all of you as well. Thank you so much. And looking
Till
forward
part
to
2.
Yes. Thank you so much to our listeners too. And we will see you on the next Sacred Conversations. Reiki blessings to all.